Welcome, executives and government officials, to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a high-stakes, bottom-line upfront briefing to unpack the strategic lessons from absolutely the most institutionally important European tech deal of the year. I'm talking about Aleph Alpha's massive transatlantic merger. We're going to trace the structural trajectory of this company right from its founding in 2019 all the way to its massive April 2026 merger, and extract the really vital lessons for the future of European sovereign AI. Okay, let's dive into this. The entire strategic landscape we're looking at is perfectly crystallized in this canonical quote from Aleph Alpha founder Jonas Andrelis. It structurally validates a really harsh truth, honestly. Frontier capability competition is simply impossible at current European funding scales. He acknowledged flat out that no European firm can build these massive models in isolation. The new objective? It isn't to build everything from scratch alone anymore. It's to figure out exactly which combination of partners can credibly rival the American hyperscalers. To understand exactly how we got here, we'll quickly cover 6 key areas: the transatlantic AI merger, the enterprise sovereignty pivot, contrasting Europe's AI strategies, the industrial capital anchor making this possible, sovereignty compliance risks, and finally, the future of European tech. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the transatlantic AI merger, a $20 billion structural shift. This April 2026 deal, it isn't just another tech transaction. It's a massive structural shift commanding a staggering $20 billion combined entity valuation. It unites Toronto-based Cohere directly with Heidelberg-based Aleph Alpha. But it's so much more than just corporate synergy. It's structurally backed by the newly signed Canada-Germany Sovereign Technology Alliance. What we're seeing here is a literal transatlantic bridge being built, specifically to challenge the absolute dominance of US-based AI labs. Moving right along to Section 2, the enterprise sovereignty pivot, where we look at headline capital versus reality. Now, if you want to understand why Aleph Alpha suddenly abandoned their grand Germany's OpenAI ambitions, you have to look at this massive gap between headline capital and actual equity. Back in November 2023, the press was touting this incredible Series B round of over $500 million. But the reality? Only about 110 million euros of that was genuine equity financing. The rest of it was tied up in research, subsidiary funding, and partner order commitments. This 4.5 times inflation between the flashy headline and the actual cash they had on hand, it completely doomed their frontier model ambitions. They simply didn't have the compute budget to run a David and Goliath race against the giants. And, well, it showed operationally. They entirely missed their 2023 internal revenue target of 5.5 million euros, generating less than 1 million, and they posted an 18.9 million euro loss. Ouch. It's been a real roller coaster. Phase 1 and 2 saw the founding in the absolute peak of that German OpenAI hype, which, as we just saw, ended in a severe revenue miss. So by Phase 3 in mid-2024, reality forced a massive pivot away from raw model power and toward enterprise deployment. This directly led to Phase 4's leadership overhaul, with founder Jonas Andrelis stepping down. And ultimately, this brings us to Phase 5 in early 2026, a painful 17% workforce reduction and the Cohere merger. The cost of getting that structural lesson right just a bit too late? It was their independence. Let's look at Section 3, contrasting Europe's AI strategies using a 5-way framework. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Aleph Alpha compares to other European players. Out of these 5 major initiatives, Aleph Alpha is literally the only one with a completed strategic outcome. Look at the board. You've got Minerva in Italy building from scratch academically. You have Amayela over in Portugal. There's the Open Euro LMM Pan-European Consortium. You have Mistral in France, who has raised over 3 billion euros and is still out there fighting the commercial frontier fight. And then you have Aleph Alpha. They are the ultimate cautionary tale that lived through the frontier pursuit and deliberately chose to pivot out of it. So what did they pivot to? Analysts call it Position 2 plus Position 4. Basically, this means combining sovereignty, openness, and strict data compliance with incredibly deep vertical specialization. We're talking specifically about targeting the public sector, defense, and highly regulated industries. By putting the brakes on that unwinnable race for raw frontier capability and focusing laser-like on this specific enterprise sovereignty positioning, Aleph Alpha successfully secured massive anchor clients: the Bundeswehr, Siemens, BMW, the German federal government. They found a brilliant niche where absolute trust and compliance actually mattered way more than just beating the latest test benchmarks. Which brings us to Section 4, the industrial capital anchor and the Schwartz Group's blueprint. This strategic pivot we just talked about, it relied entirely on industrial conglomerates. Enter the Schwartz Group. Yes, the parent company of grocery retail giants Lidl and Kaufland. They stepped in with a massive $600 million Series E commitment through their subsidiary Schwartz Digits. Now, this isn't just a standard venture capital check. It functions as the definitive European anchor capital for the newly combined Cohere Aleph Alpha entity. The Schwartz anchor model is without a doubt the most vital takeaway for executives today. Check out these steps. Step 1, commit to building an €11 billion data center infrastructure near Berlin. Step 2, develop their own STAKIT sovereign cloud platform. Step 3, secure a sovereign AI vendor, in this case Aleph Alpha, as their anchor tenant. This sequence right here, it isn't just a funding round. It is the ultimate operational blueprint for how European industrial capital can be allocated to AI at a scale that actually moves the needle, completely bypassing the limitations of traditional European venture capital. Okay, Section 5, Sovereignty, Compliance, and Risks. It is time for the analyst critique. Putting on our sovereign tech analyst hats for a second, we have to be totally objective about the friction points here. Look at this shareholder split of the new $20 billion combined entity. It is 90% Cohere and just 10% Aleph Alpha. So despite all the polite merger terminology being thrown around in the press releases, let's call a spade a spade. This is fundamentally a transatlantic acquisition, and it just reflects the financial reality. Cohere brought $240 million in annual recurring revenue to the table. Aleph Alpha, minimal revenue and significant losses. This massive disparity leads to a super pressing legal question for all the IT executives and government officials tuning in. Does Canadian majority control violate the explicit controlled in Europe procurement clauses that are rigidly required by German federal agencies and the Bundeswehr? Because the corporate domicile will almost certainly sit in Canada or in a Delaware holding company. If the company is 90% North American owned, can it honestly still claim to be European sovereign tech? Well, the defense for the merger rests heavily on international law. The main argument is that a Canadian partnership is legally distinct from a U.S. one. You see, Canada is structurally outside U.S. extraterritorial laws, specifically things like the Cloud Act and FISA Section 702. Therefore, a Cohere Aleph Alpha entity hosted locally in Germany, right on the Stackit cloud, unambiguously keeps European data entirely outside the American legal perimeter. So it's a Canadian-German sovereign alternative. Actually, scratch that. It's not purely European, but structurally it absolutely protects the data from U.S. oversight. Still, the combined entity has its work cut out for it. They must navigate a rapid-fire checklist of really hard operational risks through 2027. First, they actually have to execute and deliver their unified Command Feria 1 model by Q4 2026. Second, they've got to successfully resolve those ongoing controlled in Europe procurement disputes during their individual contract negotiations. And finally, with Cohere's tech now injected into the mix, they have to ensure their frontier capabilities genuinely rival the American hyperscalers. No pressure, right? Finally, bringing us home with Section 6, the future of European tech and the transatlantic blueprint. So what does all of this mean going forward? So the crucial point is exactly what Constellation Research analyst Holger Mueller points out right here. This move creates the absolute first vendor with both global revenue scale and actual on-the-ground sovereignty credibility in Europe. The European sovereign AI agenda must now explicitly optimize for these kinds of partnership architectures, rather than desperately trying to fund single-firm competition against trillion-dollar tech giants. Which leaves us with this provocative thought to close out our briefing today. Will this transatlantic, industrially anchored alliance become the definitive blueprint for Europe to finally secure its technological sovereignty? For the government officials and enterprise IT leaders watching, Aleph Alpha's long journey from an isolated frontier competitor to an integrated sovereign platform offers an absolute masterclass in adapting to structural realities. So, knowing all this, how will you structure your own future procurement strategies in this shifting landscape? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep adapting, and we'll see you next time.